Mr. Wall will lead us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The agenda is before you. Any changes, additions, deletions? If not, I'll hear a motion to be approved.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Goodlett. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Harlan. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Public comment. I don't see anybody from the public here. Minutes of the December 21st, 2020 meeting are before you. Any changes, additions, deletions?
Make a motion that we approve.
Motion by Ms. Harlan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Goodlett. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. Special call mayor and council minutes of December 28th, 2020. Any additions, corrections, deletions?
Motion to approve is written.
Motion by Ms. Harlan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Wall. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Under new business, 3, ratification of rental agreement with the RNC for Dalton Airport, Republican National Committee for Dalton Airport.
Yes, sir, Mayor, Council, this is a request for ratification of this agreement. RNC's paying the city $7,500 for the rental facility for the event that's taking place.
Questions, Jason?
I make a motion to pass it because I think it's too late now.
Motion by Mr. Cruz. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Wall. We could have left Jason hanging on that, whatever. It's,
Sir?
I said, we could have left you hanging on that.
Fortunately, it's money coming in instead of going out, so.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Number 4, ordinance 20-21, the request of Eric Azua to annex .172 acres located at 1230 Fraser Drive, Dalton, Georgia, is medium-density, single-family residential into the city of Dalton, parcel 12-179-02-058. Who's got that? Jason?
Mr. Calhoun will be on, Mayor.
Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be happy to answer any questions on this with a very quick explanation. This, of course, annexation being in the Unified Zoning Ordinance means that the zoning is not subject to change as part of the annexation. This is simply an annexation into Dalton. And I think the most compelling fact to look at here is the fact that when you look at the map in the staff analysis that indicates where the current city boundaries are, you'll see that the subject property is part of a small unincorporated island inside the city of Dalton's current corporate boundaries. And essentially the recommendation is to annex the subject property based on the fact that that will reduce the size of this county unincorporated island inside the city. And it's always a goal to do that. There were some additional comments, I believe, sent from Public Works that were made part of the staff analysis as well. No opposition was heard during the public hearing, and the Planning Commission recommendation was unanimous approval, as well as the staff analysis. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Hey, Ethan, do you think there'll be more to come once this one gets zoned in?
According to Mr. Azua, who did actually participate in the public hearing, he did state that several of his neighbors, once they saw the sign come up, had just kind of asked him in passing what was going on and so forth. And once he explained it to them, I think they understood and felt like they would like to look towards that as well. And his question was, is that something that can be done by city council, or do they have to come in and request that? So there is some interest stated by Mr. Azua in the public hearing. Some of the neighbors may also would like to come forth and request that annexation.
I guess I have one more question. That'll be for you, Andrew. I think we had discussed it before. Do you see a problem? I mean, I'm okay with this, but do you see a problem if, say, like, it becomes like every other one, and now you having to pick up here and there.
So I noted in my response memo, I think it would be a good idea to proactively contact the remaining homeowners in this development. We understand city staff met with the school system and they don't believe this will be a drain on their resources. They've got the capacity at Park Creek to handle it. From our perspective, it would streamline service delivery if all of those homes are in the city, just so that we don't have to guess which homes are in the city. It's sometimes hard for an operator to be able to tell if they don't have the luxury of a computer and a GIS map, things of that nature. So we would encourage that the city reach out to potentially give these folks an opportunity to annex now that we know the school system is also okay with it. The only slight point I will make is that the 5 homes on the northernmost portion were built off of a private road that does not meet city standards. So if those 5 homes are allowed to be annexed, for service delivery perspective, they'll need to bring their garbage cans and their debris down to Fraser Drive, because I confirmed with the developer that street was not built to city standards, and heavy vehicles like garbage trucks and fire trucks will damage the pavement.
Okay, thank you.
What happens with those properties now? I mean, if there's God forbid, a fire, is it just, they call I mean, Whitfield County handles it and the fire trucks at its own peril in going down there?
I don't have the agreement in front of me, but I'm guessing that's one area that probably is covered in the city's mutual aid agreement. First response with Whitfield County, just based on the location.
How many houses are we talking about?
There were 30 total as part of that development. There were actually more, but
Left to come in?
29 left. Yes, sir.
Wow. And that, yeah.
And so you can imagine if every other one is city or county, that's a little bit tough to
Why
understand.
wasn't it in the city to begin with?
It was an old county island. That property had remained owned by a family that owns a lot of property in Whitfield County for several decades. And they just never wanted it to come into the city.
I'm talking about when they developed the
It was
area.
opposed, it was opposed by the school, and then when we was on Public Works, we wanted him to build, really get all those driveways off of that street and build like one of the back street to city standards, and he wasn't doing it.
At that,
And why is it not a problem now?
well, now we've in the situation where you've got families and the kids are having to go to like East Side Elementary, Eastbrook Middle School, and there's this expectation just because they're so close that when they bought the house, they didn't realize it was in the county. Of course, that's not our fault, but from a staff perspective, we think now, since the school system is saying they don't have an overcrowding issue, it's not going to be any additional drain on our resources to deliver services. We can, I think I noted in my memo that we can perform all the regular sanitation services in our existing routes without adding any additional resources to the routes.
So how long have those houses been there?
I think they were constructed in 2018, so two to 3
So
years.
the schools had a problem 2 years ago and they got no problem today.
That's our understanding, but they were opposed to it on the front end. And as Councilman Goodlett alluded to, there were several different proposals for that development originally, but the developer did not want to do a typical subdivision with a road just due to the expense. There were, the lots in those State Street subdivisions were about a 12,500 square foot area. These lots are 5,000, so there was a desire then to increase the lot size, and the developer didn't want to do that. So the city at that time just said, we're not interested in bringing this into the city.
But they do meet the county standards?
They do meet the county standards, yes.
So the lot size is not to city,
It is to city specifications, yes, sir.
Okay.
That zoning, the council just asked for the developer to consider not chopping. This was one big tract that the developer chopped up into little bitty pieces. And at the time, there was no interest to bring that into the city. But now you've got different homeowners that are not the developer. And so, you know, it's almost a different set of facts now that we're having to make a decision on than it was 2.5 years ago.
what do those houses sell for?
You know, Jason?
No, I sure don't. I'm not sure.
I know at the time they were like 149, because my wife had a student that was living in the housing authority that went the wrong street, and they moved into this neighborhood, and then when they got in there, that kid had to go from Rome Street to East Side. So that was a big problem, because they even came to me and they let their house go into foreclosure and everything.
I think there was even an issue with the MLS listings that
Yeah.
the MLS listings had city schools advertised, and then people bought the houses and they were not. Again, that's not the city's
Yeah.
problem, but
Yeah, it was advertised as in the city, and some of them were bought, and then they found out they were in the county. And there's quite a few moving parts at that time that it may be gone now.
One of the things the Dalton Public Schools members mentioned during our staff meeting was that with the opening of the Hammond Creek School, that was going to allow the system a little bit more space to be able to absorb the students who might come from this particular area.
So there's nobody has any objection to it. The staff, any schools, our staff, nobody. Ethan, okay. There a motion on this?
So move.
Motion by Mr. Goodler, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Wall. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Margaret, how do you stay so still? I notice Carl moves around, Ethan moves around, and you stay really still there with just that smile.
A picture is worth 1,000 words, so to speak.
Mr. Mayor, while Ms. Thigpen's on, I would like to request her during the next week or so, if she can get us some economic impact numbers on this event tonight, I think would be interesting.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Number 5, first reading of ordinance 20-22 to amend Chapter 96 Stormwater Management of the Revised Code of Ordinances. Andrew?
thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight's a big night for stormwater as we move into the future with our overall planning efforts for the city. Tonight's updates makes 3 primary revisions to our existing stormwater management ordinance, which is Chapter 96 of City Code. I'll just go through these one at a time so that we can keep things simple. You let me know if you have a question at any time. First of all, the first change is a requirement of EPD for MS4 permittees to update their post-construction stormwater ordinance for development projects. We already have a post-construction stormwater ordinance today. That's what requires developers to build detention ponds or underground detention to take the site to a pre-development type condition so that they're not increasing the peak flow runoff in comparison to pre-development prior to the project. What EPD is pushing is that we now apply what's known as a runoff reduction standard, which encourages development and engineers to try to infiltrate more water on site. So the science and thought process is changing. Originally, folks in this development world and in the engineering world thought that detention would be enough. But the problem with that is that it only reduces the peak runoff in comparison to pre-development conditions. The site can still generate more volume runoff and a higher velocity runoff. And so EPD is looking at ways to combat that. And the easiest way to do it is to look at these runoff reduction standards. What this will involve is the engineer preparing a post-construction stormwater plan, and they'll do a review to see if the runoff reduction standard is feasible. If they can document that it's not feasible for a particular site, they can revert back to what our standards are today, which is to remove, without getting overly complicated, 80% of the total suspended solids generated from the site after development. That's just a water quality standard. And again, if they document that it's infeasible, that's okay. They just have to go through that exercise. So, and as I said before, these runoff reduction methods mimic the natural process for rainwater to go into the ground instead of just making the entire development paving and parking lots. So that's the first big change. That's something we really don't have a choice to do. That's a requirement from EPD. The second change eliminates an exemption for post-construction standards on 2-lane road projects. That was an update in the last EPD permit. So again, this is something we really don't have a choice about. EPD is requiring us to remove that exemption for 2-lane road projects. So what that will mean is 2-lane road projects have to have some component of detention so that the water, extra water generated by the new impervious is not just going off onto some neighbor and hurting their property. The final change is something
All of our 2-lane roads are curbed and gutter and have stormwater already, right?
they have underground stormwater infrastructure, but no detention ponds to reduce the speed at which that runoff, leaves the right of way. So what we're going to be required to do now is make little water infiltration areas, detention ponds, bioretention areas to help improve the water quality from the site. For example, right now, the Hamilton Medical Center is designing a 2-lane road to connect Broderick Drive to Elkwood Drive. And as part of that project, they're having to put 2 small detention ponds on the project so that once that rainwater hits the new impervious area, like the asphalt curb and gutter, and goes into the storm drain, it's redirected into those ponds as a measure of reducing the runoff velocity, as well as improving the water quality. If there's any oils or transmission fluid or anything like that on the road, it has to go through the pond before it goes out into Mother Nature, so to speak.
Before it goes into the creeks?
Before it goes into the creeks, that's right. Because if you think about it, building a road is very similar to building a commercial development. I mean, if you take a wooded tract that's 100% grass or forest and you put a road, you're going to generate more runoff than what it was prior to development. And so if we're asking private business and commercial development to meet these standards, I think we have to meet them too. And that's EPD's thought process. Again, that's something coming from them, not something that we really have a choice over.
That road we're talking about from Dug Gap Road to Market Street out there.
To Market Street, it will have to have some detention controls. Yes, sir. There is a process, again, without getting super technical. EPD recognizes that it's difficult to do on roadway projects in comparison to like a commercial development. So what they are allowing is for the cities and counties to develop some procedures or protocols for when road projects are being built. You don't have to satisfy it as much as a private development would, but we have to create a procedure that we do during our plan design process to justify why we can't do certain things. And so that's something at the staff level we're working on right now that will have to also be approved by the EPD. And then finally, the third change proposed to the ordinance, as you all know now, the city's jurisdiction for stormwater in terms of maintenance responsibility and operations only lies within the right-of-way, city-owned properties, or where we have publicly dedicated easements. What we've come to realize is the majority of our problems are just off the right-of-way or just on a person's property, and we have no mechanism, no ability to help resolve that problem. Further, as we work to come up with a global solution to a lot of our stormwater problems, it's hard to think about global solutions if you're confined to the right-of-way limits or easements. And so what a lot of cities are doing is identifying a process where a resident can petition the city under certain conditions to grant easement rights to come in and help resolve a problem. So I want to run through this really quickly. The 3 conditions in which the city, if this ordinance revision passes, we would consider expanding our extent of service. Number 1, it can be a private system that's directly connected to the city's right-of-way. So a lot of times we have that where you've got a road, and you've got the road storm drain system that's directly connected to a person's private pipe. If that private pipe fails, that could cause backup onto the city right-of-way, which happens quite frequently because we've got a lot of aging infrastructure. And so under this proposed ordinance revision, we could potentially accept easement to take care of that line of pipe just outside the right-of-way. The second case would be if the private system conveys primarily city-owned property or right-of-way. So if we've got, for example, a park, a city park, 100-acre park, and then immediately downstream from that park, there's a private system that if it fails, it could cause harm to the city system and we wouldn't have anywhere to discharge the water. So that would be another potential scenario. We could accept easement to start maintaining that pipe just downstream from city property. The final occasion that we could consider extent of service is if failure of the private system would result in a significant threat to the public. So if the private system failed and it could cause a road or a bridge to wash out, that could be a case where we could say we need to add this to our maintenance regimen downstream. Because the reality is most property owners, especially residential property owners, are not equipped to maintain a private pipe system that might be under anywhere from 1 to 10 feet of fill of earth. There are 2 criteria, however, under those 3 conditions that must be met before we would consider acceptance. The first one is the system cannot be damaged from negligence of the property owner. So if they've done something to intentionally damage it, we're not going to consider acceptance. And then the second criteria would be that the property owner, and this is critical, grant us a perpetual easement for maintenance. So the city attorney would tell you that the reason the city forces cannot do work off the right of way is because that's a gratuity under state law. So the person has to be willing to give us a permanent easement to perform the work. A couple other factors. We're only, the way the ordinance is crafted is that we would only consider work on residential property, so non-commercial properties, unless that third condition is met, which is it's a threat to public safety. If we check that box, then we can consider things other than residential property. And finally, if the drainage system is under a building or a structure under the current ordinance, we're proposing not to accept that just due to liability, overall liability. And the final piece to the puzzle is before we accept any of this, we would bring these individually before the city council for consideration. And as part of that request, Public Works would be responsible for bringing a corrective action plan to the table as well, so that you're not, the city council is just not being vaguely asked to approve an extent of service expansion without a plan as to how to rectify that problem. And so basically where we're at in our planning efforts, we've identified a lot of those locations off right away where we know we had historically had problems. And that number is somewhat around 40 to 50 locations. And so obviously we're not expecting to tackle all of those on day one, but under the proposed ordinance revision, it would give us a mechanism to intervene in certain situations. And as part of our planning efforts, we'll build a capital projects list and replacement maintenance list for stormwater projects that we'll start to work through over a period of time. And this will be the mechanism to get there. So going back to the overall proposed ordinance revisions, items 1 and 2 that I went over, those are requirements from the EPD. We don't have a lot of flexibility on those. Item 3 is something that's totally our decision. If we want to change the outline that I went over, we can do that between now and the second reading if you want us to look at other things. But these criteria are exactly what other communities, especially in the metro area, have used so that they're not accepting every liability, in their entire corporate limits. It identifies an objective process to work through each of these issues and locations on an individual basis. Any questions?
Assuming the Public Works Committee has recommended this?
The Public Works Committee has been studying this over the course of the last 6 months, I would say. And so we worked really hard to get to this point. And I think I speak on behalf of the committee members that they do recommend this.
Okay. All right. No other questions? Number 6, appointments to the boards, commissions, and authorities. I'm just going to go take this whole list and read down. If anybody's got a problem, stop me. Chester Clark to the Airport Authority, a 5-year term. Joanne Lewis to the Historic Preservation Commission, 3-year term. Carolyn Roan, Historic Preservation Commission, 3-year term. Kathy Snyder, Historic Preservation Commission, 3-year term. John Hutchison, Historic Preservation Commission, 3-year term. Barbara Land, Housing Authority, 1-year term. Bob Kennard, the JDA, 1-year term. Juan Carlos Ramirez, Joint Development Authority, 3-year term. Frank Robertson, Joint Development Authority, 1-year term. Louis Viamani, Public Safety Commission, 5-year term. David Snyder, Recreation Commission, 5-year term. Kenny Gowan, Commission Liaison to the Regional Development Authority, 1-year term. Diane Atkins, Tree Board, 3-year term. Nancy Hawkins, Tree Board, 3-year term. Will Esther, Tree Board, 3-year term. And Tommy Boggs, Water, Light, and Sinking Fund Commission, 5-year term. Didn't hear any objections. Do I hear a motion that these be approved?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Harlan, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Wall. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, like sign. There is no supplemental business announcement. City offices will be closed Monday, January 18th, 2021, in observance for MLK Jr. holiday. The next city council meeting will be held Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. Your motion, we adjourn.
So moved.